India today is the largest number of software developers and largest numbers of also open source contributors, etc. We've not learned to do PLG well. There are only a handful of companies that have done well, especially because building software, building product is our key strength. When you are building 0 to 1, speed of product development really matters, and customers do take note of how fast are you iterating, how fast are you shipping out new features. We, from our IT services days, we've known how to build software. And we were very good at it, but we didn't know how to build product.
Welcome back to Understanding VC. I'm your host Rahul. Understanding VC is a purposeful MBA on a single subject, venture capital. And today I'll be having an in-depth conversation on India-US SaaS corridor with Chanchal Bhoorani. Chanchal is a VP at WestBridge Capital and focuses on US-India enterprise software investments from the Silicon Valley office. And WestBridge Capital is a multi-stage investment firm with approximately $8 billion in evergreen capital. Also, one quick note. Are you looking to refresh your digital presence? Digital Prism, the Singapore based digital transformation expert sponsoring this episode, has a fantastic offer. First 10 listeners to contact them get 20 free consultation hours. Just mention Rahul sent you. And also learn more from the link in the show notes. Now let's talk to Chanchal. Hi, Chanchal. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Rahul.
So, our topic of discussion today is India US SaaS corridor. So, how would you define India US SaaS corridor?
That's an interesting question, right? The way I think about US India SaaS corridor is companies being built from India for the world, technically for the world, because why would you build only for one market, right? But given US is the biggest software market by a margin, it largely becomes that you are building from India for US and by extension for the world. That's how I define US India SaaS corridor. We are starting to see more and more companies in the corridor, and I invest in that space.
Why is this interesting?
So different people find it interesting for different reasons. For me, it's when I grew up in India. I worked in India in tech for 5 years after school, and I was in some of the hottest startups in the country. But we always looked up to the US, the Silicon Valley, as the mecca of tech. That this is where the innovation is happening, and that innovation is happening because it's funded by the market. You can afford to invest in innovation because you know that you can then sell it later. And this market was not very accessible to us outside of software. If you want to build a consumer brand, it's hard to build it from India for the US. But software has this unique power or unique access where you can build it anywhere in the world. You could be sitting in a small town with just a laptop only person. If you can build a good software, it can be for the world. So that opened up that entire market for us to be able to have been built from India. When I moved to the US, I noticed. I wasn't the first to notice that trend. There are a lot of people already operating in this space, but then that's when you start to see that there are certain structural advantages of building software from India that we can talk about. But that's when, and then you try to figure out how do we exploit those structural advantages to build for this large economy, the large market of software in the US. And that's what's really interesting and exciting to me. I do believe that India has a lot of advantages to be operating there.
Yeah. What are these structural advantages?
I think the biggest one and the most talked about is just the number of software developers that we have. Right, India today is the largest number of software developers and largest numbers of also open source contributors, etc. We've been building software for so many years thanks to IT services. We have really high number of talents. We can argue about the quality of the talent, but if you just look at the sheer number and if you're not talking about the cutting edge innovation, we just have that advantage. But why is that number interesting? And why does it matter? It matters because when you are starting a new company, how easy or hard it is for you to hire developers, how competitive it is to hire developers. While we talk about a lot of competition in Bangalore now in hiring developers, I think if you just look at the broader country, if you don't restrict yourself to certain geographies, we do have access to that resource a lot more easily. And then number two, that is a lot more affordable. And again, why does that matter? It's not just because you can build it cheap, but because for the same amount of money, you can have a lot more developers, and that allows you to just have a lot high product velocity, which is which is an advantage that not many geographies can afford, not just the US, but even if you were building from Europe or Israel, for example, the talent there is expensive because it's just not that easily available. And when you are building 0 to 1, speed of product development really matters. And customers do take note of how fast are you iterating, how fast are you shipping out new features. So I think that's the one big advantage that India affords when it comes to software development, particularly. I think the second advantage is just that it's a community. When you feel like, as a country, as a geography, you're coming in from behind, everyone wants to help each other, and you don't have to make your own mistakes. People are the community has gotten very strong. People are very open to sharing their own mistakes. And so you learn from others' mistakes and just move forward faster. It's a little less talked about advantage, but I see it as a very structural advantage. Would that continue to be 20 years later? I'm not sure. But right now, because the community is relatively small, and we all feel that we want to take the country forward in SaaS, we want our country to make a name. That community is very strong and very open to sharing.
Yeah, I mean, so I asked this question to Sebastian Malaby, who wrote the Power Law, on this
Mhm.
podcast, and this was his answer on Silicon Valley. The culture in Silicon Valley is that people don't just work for themselves; they work for Silicon Valley. So there's
Mhm.
always that uh, helping paid forward sort of mentality. Uh,
Yeah.
I think with people like Avinash Raghava, yeah, we also are starting to have that sort of mindset in
Mhm.
India. I always think we need as many Avinashes as capital, VCs, and other things.
No, maybe more.
Yeah,
When capital, I think they play their own roles, but I think, especially in the early days, the support from the community makes a lot more of a difference.
sheer number, the community, anything else?
I think the third thing, which is not a structural advantage, just a trend that has happened, is that we, from our IT services days, we've known how to build software. Right? We were very good at it, but we didn't know how to build product. And there's a difference, right? You were told what to build and you could just go build it, but building that intuition for product, that as a community we've gotten stronger about, thanks to the likes of Zoho, which started way back then, $1 billion company, growing 30% or so even in this environment, with no VC capital having gone in. But the people who were at Zoho or Freshworks, they've built a sense for how to build product. So that's another muscle that we've developed now. There are a few other things that we need to build to be even more successful, but as a community, so that's a new muscle that we've built, and that's working to our advantage now.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the rest of the muscle that need to be built is like go to market, branding, design. These are
Yeah,
all
yeah.
things with less experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, I already know what is the answer. What are the key factors you think that contributed to rise of this? The experience with IT services is definitely one, and also the talent. Anything else that you think led to this?
Yeah, I think that some of the early role models, right? The If you see, for in any geography, any geopolitical region, any industry, you need first few winners. And at that time, not many people are attempting it because you have not seen success. But once you see some people be successful, there are a lot more people trying to do operate in that space. and operate with a lot more confidence. So it's like 4-minute miles. One seemed impossible for human race, but once one person did it, then just within a year, so many more people were able to do it, right? So it seems possible. It seems possible to build a global software company from India. So the likes of Zoho, I will, give them a lot of credit for the way they built it, but Freshworks and some other early iCertis or some other early companies became the role model, both from that this is possible, but also then creating a playbook of how to do it from India. Again, sometimes we try to overfit what these companies did. Everybody tries to emulate, and that can become a problem because the same model doesn't work for all types of software. But they did create a playbook. And secondly, the talent that we had software talent, but as we talked about, the talent that was in these companies knew how to build it. They saw it, they were a part of that journey, and that created that skill set in them, but also a little more aspiration to be like, I can do this, I can build it. So you see a lot of Chennai mafia, Freshworks mafia, Zoho mafia. And Chennai is actually churning out so many more software companies than Bangalore, for example, today. So I think that has led to the rise. And the third thing is just VC dollars, right? For any ecosystem to get developed, you need the capital, and just the percent of VC capital that's gone in software as part of the overall capital going in tech companies, it just continue to increase because as you see more success, you see more dollars going into it. So all these three, four things have led to the rise of India SaaS.
What is the unique advantage that we have? I mean, we talked about building a sustainable SaaS business is not just building the product, right? So, what other unique advantage that we have that makes you think that okay, we can compete in the US?
See, we have been competing in the US, well, for the same reasons, right? As I think one thing we didn't talk about, we have fa- cheaper talent available. We have a lot more of that talent available, so we can build that product fast. Um, the third thing is then you can offer it at a lot cheaper price, right? In US, you have just talk about Salesforce, right? It was a very easy to use software. Today, no, like apart from some of the largest enterprises don't want to use Salesforce because it's just become expensive, not just from the per license price, but just the total cost of ownership, right? The amount of time and money that it takes to implement Salesforce and then maintain Salesforce, and then training your employees. The employees are not that willing to continue to use Salesforce, right? So you've seen the rise of HubSpot or Freshworks in different spaces trying to compete. So you can build a software that's cheaper. I think one advantage being away from the market, while there are a lot of disadvantages of being away from building a software for a market while you're away from it. But one advantage it affords you is that it forces you to think more first principles. You are not as impacted by how things have always been done. So you can take a fresh look at attempting the same problem. So if we think about procurement, right, as an industry, Coupa was started to replace, to be a better version of SAP, Ariba, and the likes. It's now become that bloated company that it's become the company that it was supposed to replace essentially. Right now, you need other people coming in to build an easier version of Coupa. But obviously, the market has to be large enough that even if you're building for just SMB and mid market, you can still be a big enough company. But also, then you need people taking a fresh take. The way procurement software has always been built from the perspective of a procurement administrator, right? People in the procurement team. But you've not thought of, we're seeing increasingly of more Indian companies coming in and are thinking about it from the business user's perspective, which I haven't seen being, that the way software is built in the space was never built from the business user's perspective. But when you're away from it, you can think about it.
So, capital efficiency, right? So, I mean, over the years, in the last 10, 15 years, the cost of building a product has also dramatically gone down in terms of the cloud infrastructure and everything else, right? Eh, eh, do you think this will continue to be the case? As in, like, we will not have that advantage for long, right?
We would, I feel we would, because that this will reduce, because sure, cloud and all of that is, or even automation, AI would
Yeah.
reduce the advantage to some extent. I don't think that'll go away, because you would still need people to do something, some more things, right? So that people advantage will continue to be. I think there are also areas beyond R&D where you can exploit this cost arbitrage, right? You can have a lot of your GTM team sitting out of India, right? You can have a lot of your product marketing team sitting out of India. So it just doesn't have to be R&D. Your inside sales, we've some of the companies in the space have shown that that model works. You can have teams sitting out of India doing running inside sales motions. You can have your BDRs, SDRs sitting out of India, making calls, doing demos, etc. And it works. It may not be per person basis as efficient as it would be when you're in the same geography, in the same time zone, but still the advantages are significant today.
So, despite all this, what do you think are some of the challenges facing Indian companies then when they
Bidding
when they
for,
are,
yeah.
yeah, targeting US market?
Yeah, I think the other side of that same coin that we talked about, it's like when you're away from the noise, you can take a first principles approach. I think
Yeah.
there are a lot of disadvantages of it. When you're not in the market, you don't understand, you may not understand the nuance of the market. You may not understand the needs of the users, right? Uh, for example, just the software preference, the UI UX preference changes by region a lot. The software that we feel comfortable with, the UI we feel comfortable with, is very different in how what you would see in East Asia versus Europe, and or just Western markets. I think Europe and US have largely similar preferences there. Um, so just understanding the specific need, the work, even understanding workflows is hard from a distance. So that's one. I think then building a brand is just not easy. I think we can sometimes lean too much into, this is a cheaper software being built in India. There is a some bias in the US when they look at a company being built from India. But I think sometimes we also lean too much into it. If you're building a, let's say, a cheaper version of software, of say sales software, CRM software of Salesforce, it makes sense to advertise or brand yourself as that. But if you are building a premium product, and we do have companies building that way, then you don't need to lean into that access of the, you're a cheaper software being built out of India. Maybe, I think, very few Indian companies that have felt confident enough to price their product more expensive than the US counterparts. And you can, if you feel your software does add that sort of value. So I think we need to figure out how do we brand ourselves in the right way. There are a category of software we have learned to brand. The other ones we need to crack. And on the same access, I think just generally figuring out the GTM. It's hard for everybody, no matter where you're building it from. But if, let's say, you are a founder who has spent most of the time in India, and of course, to build in the US, you have to sell in the US. One of the founders has to spend time in the US, if not move fully. And then you need to hire a sales team. And that is one of the hardest challenges. I was surprised to two reasons, because you're usually we see a lot more technical founders building software companies. So you've probably not done sales yourself. So you don't know what you're looking for. B, you're trying to hire someone with in a very different context, right? So you don't know how to evaluate them specifically, right? How there is a difference in the way you evaluate men and women, because men show confidence in a certain way and women show confidence in a different way. So you need to be educated so that you don't put a certain gender at a disadvantage. Similarly, how do you evaluate a candidate in a different region is hard. So I think hiring of sales team is extremely, extremely hard. And of
Yeah.
course, you have to be even better at being able to convince. convince strong candidates to join you, right? Because they don't know you. You may, or they know you less of, right? They know you may be very popular company in India because you're building there. You're as a founder based on what you've done, your pedigree, all of that would have just less recognition amongst most of the talent. So just convincing good talent to join you is hard. I think finally, just cultural integration between two geographies is not as much as talked about as much. But if you want to create one team that's operating in two regions, especially India and US, which are on two very different extremes, that cultural integration is one of the harder problems to solve.
Yeah. No, the one thing that I really like about people from the US are they're really good at selling themselves. And
Yeah.
the thing with salespeople is that, uh, yeah, they sell themselves
That,
really well.
yeah.
So then it's hard to judge.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that, the product experience expectation and might be different from what a customer expects in India and in the US. That means it's like finding product market fit all over again, I guess.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's where you see companies struggle or take a couple of years to just find that product market fit again.
Yeah. That is also a struggle. Hiring a salesperson is also a struggle and expensive. All these are very time consuming and expensive, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then as a VC, do you expect a, a, a SaaS business to already have figured out all this before you invest, or you're willing to invest for them to expand? That it's usually you have to show some sort of early customer interest
Yeah,
in
I
the
think
US.
it depends on, what stage do you invest in. If you're a seed stage investor, you can't expect a company being built out of India to have already shown product market fit in the US, right? But if you're a Series B, Series C investor, you may have that expectation. I think that changes by stages. It's always good to show some traction in the US. It just makes fundraise a lot more easier, but it's not always possible. In fact, it also changes by just the nature of software that you're building. There are companies who grow to be a $10 million ARR business in India before they think about coming to the US, right? So uh, there you are underwriting when you're investing in them some different things versus there are companies who come to the US as soon as they are $1 million in revenue in India or even smaller. And that's also a function of how big a market you have for that specific software available in India, right? And then there are also, there are not many companies that build just for India, but we do have a couple of companies in our portfolio. Just the India software market is large enough that they are, not going to think about US anytime soon, and they're just going to continue to sell in India for a long time.
And what would you recommend? So the recommendation would be based on the sort of industry they're operating in, or the
The industry you're in.
you mentioned a company with 10 million ARR and 1 million ARR, right? But what point would you decide to target US market?
I think there's no one answer that fits all. But I would say it's a function of ROI, right? You, if you continue, let's say you're at $1 million ARR and now you're thinking about, do I continue to spend time here or do I go to the US, right? When you're going to the US, you are going to have to change your product a bit. You are going to have to do user research again, assuming the initial product that you built, you're not from day zero building for US, right? Some companies do that too. So, but here I'm assuming that's not the case. Now you're building, you have to spend time doing that. You have to spend time in market discovery, in hiring the sales and GTM teams, generally building a brand, all of that. So that's going to take time before it starts to show you results. And the other approach could be that I continue to sell in India, continue to focus here, and have a very small part of my overall effort going into understanding US market or changing my product for the US a little bit. But you can only do that when you have access to the market in India. The market has to be large enough. The market has to have some white space. So I think it'll be a function of what you can do. If you see a lot of market available in India, you can just grow to $10 million ARR. You're a much bigger company. You can You can raise a lot more capital so that when you're thinking about then building selling to the US, you can hire a lot more people. You just have a lot more resources to tackle that market. Because sometimes you figure out US PMF at once, it might take you a couple of attempts to figure that out, both in getting the product uh, figured out and then also GTM fit, right? It takes some iterations to figure out what the right ICP is, what the right GTM is. And when you stay longer in India, you can also get a better sense of your ICP, while you would still need to figure out what that is for the US, but you start to get incrementally better at identifying it.
Yeah. And go to market strategy, right? Like, what is the right approach here? Just looking at what the companies before you have done from India, that means maybe looking at what Freshwork has done, or does it always, change too fast to a point where you have to still adapt?
Yeah, I think that's where I feel we have overdone in copying some of the successful companies. We are investors in Freshworks. I love the company. We have a lot of respect for what they've achieved. But I think that on the flip side of it, we see a lot more companies trying to have the same GTM approach, which doesn't work for everybody. That approach works for Freshworks because of the nature of the market they are in, the kind of users they're going after. They are purely, they started as purely SMB focused company, and then now with newer products, they're becoming more mid market and even lower enterprise company. And they are adopting their GTM strategy now significantly, right? But we don't see that. We just see how they did things back in the day and try to replicate that. One of the other disappointments in GTM strategies I've had with India is just how we've not learned to do PLG well. There are only a handful of companies that have done well, especially because building software, building product is our key strength. I would have expected a lot more PLG first companies from India.
Yeah. I've heard that doesn't work after an initial point. I don't know much, but yeah. Does it
It's
work?
true. It's true that beyond a certain point, when you want to target large enterprises, it's hard to do it with PLG, and you can't build typically can't build $1 billion business just with PLG. But it doesn't mean that you can't build a tens of millions of dollars of business or even $100 million business with just PLG. Depending upon the market you are in, you can. And I think for any company, it's hard to be selling to enterprises on day zero, because you need a lot better built out product, just simply, or have a brand, or have customer testimonials to be selling to larger enterprises. In that journey, you can leverage PLG a lot more. At least he gave us the example of what can you do, how big a business can you build sitting out of Australia, in the US, and the rest of the Western world. So, and it's been a while since they did that. So we have a lot of lessons, and a lot more companies after that have done that.
Considering all these challenges, what are some of the sort of strategies that you've seen? I think we can talk about both, maybe finding product market fit in the US market, and also go to market, and also hiring. And
Yeah.
yeah, what would be your suggestions as well?
I'll just say that I know little, not so there are other people in the industry who've spent a lot more time in the space, and can add a lot more value to your question, but I'll give it a shot. So I think when it comes to product market fit, one of the biggest advantage is just get one of the founders to move to the US as soon as possible. Right? It can be daunting if you have not spent any time in the US. It can be really expensive, depending upon your personal life, if your family, kids. It can be really hard, but there is no other way to do it well. If you want to understand the users, you have to just spend a lot more time in the region, right? I think that likes of SaaS Boomi are doing a really good job of making that transition easier for founders, giving them that community. They're like questions like, which area should I stay in? Which school should my kids go to? How do I figure out the food situation? I don't have time to cook, right? So questions like that. It can be a lot, but I think that if you want to crack the US market, just get your product founder, uh, to move to the US as soon as possible. And preferably, if you can afford to get your product leaders, some of the senior product folks, if not engineering as well, to also move to the US or just spend a lot more time in the US and talk to a lot of customers. I think we have it in, everybody does, but especially like I think as Indians, I'm generalizing a little bit here, but we we just enjoy building the software process so much more, but we need to just be speaking to users a lot more, get out of the building, talk to more people who are not like you, because in also in it's a lot easier to find other Indians in the target companies, and then you end up talking to them a lot more. It's just because it's easier to get access to them. Your networks will likely lead you to them a lot more, but it's important to talk to more diversified set of users. On the GTM side, I think it's more about hiring. You have to understand the ICP first. So you got to experiment a lot. And again, being in the geography really, really helps. So the faster you can narrow down your ICP, the more efficient and faster your sales becomes. We've seen companies even after 3-4 years of selling in the US don't know what their real ICP is. We sometimes want to do everything, right? Like, sure, you would see early some traction in many different user segments, but you gotta take a call off on which one do you want to target first. On hiring, I think there's a biggest challenge on how to hire first set of salespeople well. I think there we've seen success. Founders who've had success in is those who relied on mentors or advisors in making that hiring. So it's not something that you can learn. It's not a theoretical thing that someone tells you, go look for these 4 signs, right? How do I look for these 4 signs is hard. So relying on your advisor network who spend time in the US to both help you connect to the right people to interview and then help you also interview. So for example, some of our portfolio companies like Innovator, for example, when they were coming to the US, we connected them to the founder of Aetna Health, which was classmate with our managing partner. And the way they were able to help Innovator is very, very unique. We personally could not have added that kind of value, but the person helped them hire their first set of salespeople. Right. So because he spent so much time in the industry, he knew exactly what to look for. He knew some of the good people in the industry for them to even be interviewing.
Yeah. Any interesting tactics that you've come across these three things: GTM, hiring, or identifying PM, product market fit? I mean, this sounds like the general approach that everybody should sort of take. Anything unique that you've come across?
So I've seen some of the founders lean into a lot of the student ecosystem. Um, so we have a lot of Indian students coming to study in business schools, master, undergrad, like all over. He leverage that network, which is across many different business schools, many different just schools, and they are surrounded by a lot of diverse set of people who come from many different industries. Right, it's a very diverse, a captive audience that you have, and run large like internship sort of programs, or even internship can be competitive, but if you run for summer internships can be competitive, but if you run during the year part-time sort of internships to collect just user feedback, right, that can just get you a lot of responses very, very quickly. It is though secondhand, you are not getting that directly, but then get that to get the volume of responses and then funnel it out and talk to the people. I've seen a couple of founders do that, and I thought that was really interesting and smart way of, with minimum resources, get a high volume of user feedback.
One other question. So, if you're a founder, want to spend a couple of months in the US, what should I do with the health insurance? I know health insurance is so expensive in the US.
I actually do not have a good answer to that. I I'm sure that's a big question. I just have not thought about it myself. But if, as
Actually,
a
I was
founder, if you're
thinking about
listening to
it.
this, have a question as a founder, reach out to me offline. I'll figure this out and I'll get you the answer.
Yeah.
And so you
So,
said you were thinking about it? You're thinking about moving to the US?
no, 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 no. I was thinking if I had to come and stay in the US for a couple of months, what if something happens? What would I do? I know it's shit's expensive.
Yeah, if it's just for a couple of months, you can definitely all get travel insurance, which is which can be reasonably cheap. As a student, I got United Health insurance through some other third party that made it very, very cheap and a lot more affordable. But I had the same coverage as United, right? So there are new startups like that. You have to do your research and making sure that those are good quality insurances. But something like that is available.
Yeah.
But if you're here
And
longer, I don't know what the answer is.
so, what sort of companies, SaaS companies from India, are interesting to you at the moment, and why?
I think my answer is not very, at the moment. This is the type of companies that I'm always interested in, is the companies that are building anti-hype. So spaces, traditional industries that have been least served by tech, just anyone that's building for those industries. Like I used an example of procurement. Such a vast market. There's a lot of work that's been done in supply chain, a lot of companies operating there, but just the procurement piece of the supply chain is so underserved and is huge. They control so much more spend. It's hard to build because it's not very intuitive. So if you've not been in the space, or it's hard to have intuition for the space. But anyone who's just building for these old school, under underinvested by tech industries, construction, for example. If you're building software for construction, we've seen how fast Procore grew, right? But there are a lot of other areas of construction that are um, not as well served even today. Those are the companies that I'm really excited about. I like to see big market, especially companies that are being built from India. If you're not going to be the number one player or even number two player in a space, that's fine as long as the space is big. You need to then make sure that the space is really large, and then if it is, then there can be plenty of market in just mid market and SMB. So just go after them, build easier to use product. I always like that. There's always evolution of products, right? Um, some of the companies that seem like industry benchmark today will become legacy over time, and so there's always need for newer and newer companies coming up in the same space, which might even seem competitive today, but that's just a cycle that always happens. I think secondly, there's a lot of obviously AI hype right now. I feel like all software companies are AI companies. They've always had, most of them have had an angle of AI. Always used to call them SaaS. We now call them AI. A lot of companies that we invested in that were primarily like intelligent conversational chatbot, we call them SaaS now. We call them AI. But I think in that, I'm not sure if we have any advantages in the foundation or infrastructure layer. India doing anything, or Indian companies having an advantage building from India for the globe. There's opportunity there for using some of the things that are being done here to find applications for India that can be large and that can be unique to India because of just the scale and the number of people we have, some of the unique dynamics of India. Those are the type of companies that I'm excited about right now.
And so, if a startup who's looking to move to the US is looking to raise funds, what should their approach be, or should they even raise from a US VC?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot. Actually, I get asked to make introductions because we do growth stage investing. I get asked for a lot of introductions to early stage US investors. And I'm not sure that's always the right approach for a founder sitting in India, right? You don't want capital from the US just because it's capital from the US, right? You need to see who is at a given point in time, what help do you need? and who is in the right position to help you. For example, if you are a seed stage company raising maybe Series A, and then you want to go figure out US product market fit, a US VC may not be able to help you with this transition as much. But want to you do want someone who understands the US market a little bit. So you see a lot of few venture firms, and increasingly more now, focusing on this US India corridor, who have arms in India and offices in the US. So they have teams that understand both, and WestBridge is just one such example. Um, so maybe raising from them can be helpful, so that they understand your India context too. They've seen a lot of founders go through this journey. They can introduce you to a lot more of founders like that, but while also being able to help you crack this market. But let's say if you were raising your seed round, and you're going to first try out your product in India before you get to your Series A, there may not be as much value in raising from a US VC. And in fact, in last couple of years, we've seen the India market actually doing a lot better than the US market. So it's not always that the US VC will give you better valuation or overall better terms. I've in fact seen, on the contrary, in last couple of days, you're able to get a lot more attention, because we are still a smaller community, from investors, and also, like, how much time are they willing to spend on you? If you uh, if you raise a small check from a US VC, which is a lot of companies, so how much resources are they willing to spend on you? How much time from the partner that you're going to get, versus an India equivalent of that fund? So those are all the factors to think about. But if you do figure out that you want to raise from someone in the US, and if you haven't personally spent as much time or don't have that much network, I think this US India corridor investors are a good starting point.
Okay. So for the same folks, right, besides leveraging the existing investor to help with everything in the US, right, in terms of hiring and go to market strategy and everything else, uh, what are the other, I mean, what should be the strategy for a founder in 2024? You just mentioned leveraging the India US SaaS corridor.
So you're looking for strategies for fundraise?
So for to do anything, if you have not been in US at all, either as like a student or you've never worked in the US, it's quite hard to build a relationship just about for anything, right?
Yeah, I think India's SaaS corridor is a good starting point, but just generally, at least in the valley, just India network, right? People with any India nexus, um, are there are plenty of us. You can get to literally any company with through just that network, right? So, and you'll see more willingness to help out. You will be able to have better reach to them through a warm introduction, because it's still, and I'm not talking about US India SaaS corridor, right? I'm just talking about people who are first generation, second generation Indians, or people who've been in the US for 20, 30 years, not even in SaaS. You want to sell to, say, a B2C company, you will find plenty of Indians there in tech roles, especially. And you will have some sort of connect to them, if not second degree, maybe third or fourth degree. But even if you write to them cold, you're a lot likely to hear back from them faster um, than usual. So I would go via that. If you look at the CIOs, for example, there's just disproportionately large numbers of Indian CIOs today in even the largest companies, right? So if you want to say, for example, sell something to a GM, I don't know who their CIO right now is, but you're just likely to find a lot easily, even to the highest levels. Or today, now you're increasingly we are seeing more and more Indian CEOs come up, but that's usually not where you want to start from. But you would see heads of products, a lot of VPs from India origin. I think that's a very good starting point. Even if they're not very involved in the US India ecosystem, you can just get to them a lot easily with cold outreach as well.
And looking ahead, like how do you see this India-US SaaS corridor evolving over time?
Yeah, I feel like we are still in the very early days of this corridor evolution. We've seen a few successes, but this is an exponential journey, right? Uh, the number of companies we saw in the space last year exponentially more than the companies we saw maybe even 2 years ago, right? We're getting sophisticated. We are increasing in numbers. We are learning to bridge the gaps as the communities is growing. We have more people to learn from, I think, and as it's a flywheel, right? You more companies coming up, more people from those companies will start building software. We know how to leverage our strengths well. So I think this corridor is just going to expand more and more. There are more and more VC dollars that are going to go in this space. It's a really good time to be in this space if you're a founder thinking about whether to take that leap of faith. I think now is a really good time. Even though macro might not look as exciting, but for an early stage founder, 0 to 1, uh, not the best macro is actually the best time to start.
Yeah. So, I mean, the US market, enterprise market, everybody knows is the largest. So, isn't this what everybody else is also thinking? Everyone in Europe, Israel, just about anywhere, people in
Yeah,
Singapore.
yeah. Everyone's thinking that, and everyone is taking a crack at it. So we're not the only geography trying a stab at it. I think, though, some of the structural advantages that we talked about are unique to India. Even in Israel, talent is really expensive, and they are just number of people wise a lot smaller country, right? So we just have a lot more number of talent, quantity of talent, and just affordability of talent is really high for us. And as we've talked about, the strength in numbers. So there's just the number of companies that come out of India are going to be a lot higher than they come out from any other region. Having said that, I think Israel US ecosystem has done some of the things a lot better that we need to learn from. Right, they are ahead of us, I believe, today in terms of just innovation. Um, we have, I wouldn't say we don't have that quality of talent. It's just the ecosystem is such that we are not operating in that top usually, right? There are still some exceptions. We have a bunch of deep tech companies being built out of India, but I think Israel has done a better job than us in that. Similarly, they've done a lot better job in branding and GTM than us, right? But that's also that corridor started to evolve before US India SaaS corridor started to evolve, so they have a head start, which is a good thing for us in terms of we can just learn from them, right? So that's a good place to learn from how those companies have cracked. But to answer your question, yeah, no, we are not unique in knowing about this space. We do have some advantages that we need to lean into and exploit them to make a difference over the other geographies.
Yeah, and also get good at areas where we're weak at, right? Like
Yeah,
similarly, I
yeah.
mean, 10, 15 years ago, we did not know how to build a product. Now,
Hmm.
yeah, getting there sort of thing. And, what would happen in the future in the India-US SaaS corridor that will make you go, wow?
I think I'm already there. Maybe a biased answer because I operate in that space, but there's a reason I chose to operate in this space, right? Like I moved to the US thinking I want to be in the Valley. And when I came here, I left India to come to the US thinking I want to be in the Valley, I want to be in the US ecosystem. But when I came here, I saw the disproportionate advantage this US India software corridor specifically had. That even while being here, I want to operate in US India. I want to, not be like, uh, uh, I just want to be in the Valley, interact only with Valley only companies or things like that. I I'm really very keen to see a couple more like large. Atlassian or Canva like companies, PLG companies coming out of India. Maybe this is just the PM in me speaking. I think you need strong product managers and just strong engineering capabilities uh, to get to PLG success, understand users, such, and then being able to transition what they need via your product. So yeah, that will make me go wow even more. But I'm already pretty excited about this space. It's just a function of now, giving it time to evolve over time.
Yeah. Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me, Rahul. This was fun.